guys, Zia and Bear here from GSD Bear. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be discussing some recovery tips that you might find helpful if your dog has just had a total hip replacement or even if they just had some other type of surgery. Tip number one is to get a crate that's going to be suitable for your dog for at least the 6 weeks that they're going to be spending in there. They're going to need to have enough room so that they can turn around comfortably, but equally you don't want it to be too large so that they're going to be able to do laps in it. It needs to be comfortable, but it also needs to be restrictive because that is the whole idea. If you haven't already, tip number two, make sure you have crate trained your dog leading up to the surgery. This is always a good idea for puppies. You never know when it's going to come in handy. It's just a really good idea to have that training. In the shops it can be quite expensive, but if you have a look on Amazon they're quite easy to get hold of for a reasonable price. I had a quick search earlier and loads of them come up. For Bear we got him an extra large crate being a German Shepherd, and that was about 4 foot by 2.5 foot and it was pretty big. It did take up a lot of space in the living room, which is where I would suggest that you keep it. It's not really fair for them to be in a room that's isolated from the rest of the family. It's going to be stressful for them. They're not going to really understand why they've got to be in there so much. So you're going to make it a lot easier on them if you keep it in a really well used area like the living room, as we did, and then they're always with you and they don't feel left out at all. Tip number three is to pad out the crate with as much as possible. So with Bear what we did is we bought a single duvet and we used that to line the whole bottom of the crate and then also halfway up the side, so the walls were half covered with a soft surface. We also then bought a normal pillow, a cushion, and we cable tied that to the back as well. So it was basically like a human bed. It was really comfortable and I know that because I tried it out. So you've got the duvet along the side, the cushion at the back, and then you've got some dog mattresses in the base as well. And then we also had blankets on top of that, and that was like 3 layers of padding then, so that was pretty comfortable for him. Obviously the ideal thing to do would be buying an orthopedic bed that will fit the crate, but that's not always possible depending on the size of the crate. They can be a little bit awkward, and also because they're spending so much time in there. With Bear, he was eating in there and drinking, so if you buy a large orthopedic mattress, you do run the risk of it getting dirty and they're not as easy to clean sometimes, whereas with the mattresses that we bought for Bear in the bottom, they were cheap, we could just chuck them out, get a new one in. But if you feel confident that you can buy an orthopedic mattress that's going to fit your crate and it's going to be easy to wash, that's probably the better option in the long run because it is going to be better for the joints. Tip number four is do not underestimate the importance of the cone of shame. This is probably Bear's least favourite part about the whole thing. He really hated the cone. It's really restrictive, which obviously is the point, and he just didn't like that, especially at night because he was in a small space in the crate. Well, even though it's a large crate, because he had such a massive cone on, and it had to be large because as a German Shepherd with a long nose, it had to be long enough that he couldn't get past the end of it, if you know what I mean. That just made it a little bit difficult for him to turn around, but it was just a necessary evil really. He had to have it on. We really couldn't compromise with that for the first 2 weeks. I know that it's really tempting to take it off. The dog's probably going to cry to have it off. You're going to want to take it off. I know I certainly did. But it's really just not worth the risk. For the sake of 2 weeks of being uncomfortable, it's just something you've got to do. During the day you do have the option of maybe getting an inflatable collar, which is a little bit less restrictive and more comfortable to wear. It doesn't stop them from really getting at the wound. If they really tried they could, because they haven't got the restriction of the length. But during the day, if you're watching them and you're supervising them, it's sort of just an extra barrier between them getting to the wound and you intervening. So if they are really struggling with the cone, that might be an option, but you have got to monitor them because, as I said, they can still get at the wound if they really try. During the night, there really is no alternative to the cone. Obviously, you can't be watching them. It's just not worth running the risk. Don't do it. For the sake of 2 weeks, just don't do it. Make sure you wear the cone, not you, the dog. Tip number five is to sleep downstairs with them if you can. So with some dogs, they're probably not going to be used to sleeping in a crate all night. Bear certainly wasn't, even though he was crate trained. He had the choice of coming and going as he pleased, and he was used to sleeping on the sofa. So he was not a fan of sleeping in the crate, and it did definitely show for the first 2 weeks, especially when he had the cone on. It didn't make for an easy night's sleep by any means. So what we found was if we slept by him on the sofa, if he did get uncomfortable during the night, as he often did, and he was crying and he was unsettled, we could just quickly, go over to the crate, settle him back down. So yeah, grab your duvet and get comfortable. It's not that bad. Tip number 6 is to take time off if you can. Obviously it's a long process and I'm not saying you need to take 12 weeks off work, but if you've got multiple people in your household, if you can take a couple of weeks off between you, it is going to make the process go a little bit easier for your dog. The first couple of weeks it is so easy for them to dislocate it, and also you've got the risk of them introducing an infection if they do lick the wound. So if you can be with them for those first couple of weeks, it will also make the recovery process go a lot smoother for you. Tip number 7 is to make a ROTA for your medications. So with Bear, he was taking something like 5 to 6 different medications a day, sometimes more than once, often more than once. So making a ROTA is going to make it easier for you to keep track of when you've got to give it to him. You can tick it off when it's done, and then you're not going to run the risk of over or under medicating them. It's also best if you've got multiple people in the household that this is sort of the job of one person, because it means that you're going to be able to keep track of it a lot easier. Tip number 8 is sneaking medication into food. Bear got very good at knowing when we had sneaked something into his food. He's got like a sixth sense. So we had to get quite creative with ours, and we did work our way through pretty much every treat and food in the fridge. We sort of tried everything, all the tricks in the book, and we even tried just putting it in and keeping his mouth shut at one point because it was just not playing ball at all. But what we settled on was, for tablets, we would get some cheese and sort of soften it a little bit so it was manageable, and put the tablet in it, roll it up into a ball and pop it in. Some of the tablets had a bit of a smell to them, so we had to bring out the big guns with those tablets to get those down him, and that was the ice cream. He really loved ice cream, and I know it's not the best for them, but just to get the tablets in him, that's what we found worked for him. So we would crush these tablets up between 2 spoons so it was like a fine powder, and then I would put that in the ice cream, mix it in, and he loved that. He lapped it right up, and that was the easiest way that I found to get tablets in him. Sometimes as well we'd also use the filling for the Kongs. Same principle with the ice cream, crush the tablets in it and then mix it in, and because the Kong paste is quite strong smelling anyway, that seemed to mask the smell, so we didn't mind taking it. So yeah, my go-to foods for hiding treats would be cheese, ice cream and Kong filling. Tip number 9 would be to keep the dressing on the wound for as long as it stays on. So over time, obviously, especially as the hair grows back, it's going to start to raise the dressing from the area, and they lose this sticky anyway because they're lying on it all the time, so it does peel off at the edges. If it comes off, obviously don't panic. As long as they don't lick it, it's not going to get infected, so don't panic about that. But if it does stay on, equally don't worry about that either. Some people will worry that by keeping the dressing on it's going to prevent the wound from breathing, but our vet said, like, don't worry, if it comes off, that's fine. If it stays on, it's fine. We had one dressing for his first hip replacement, and that stayed on for literally the first 2 weeks, which was the whole time before he had the stitches removed. I don't know how, but it managed to stay on. Most of the time these dressings are a breathable fabric anyway, so you don't need to worry about, the air not getting to it. But in my experience, it's just a little bit of extra peace of mind that they're not going to be able to lick the wound, so if it stays on, bonus. Tip number 10 is to get a harness and a sling. Your vet probably will give you these when they come out of surgery anyway. When we picked Bear up, he came out with it on. They passed him over to us with the sling around his waist and the harness around his chest. It was just support really in case he slipped. I think for the whole 6 weeks we kept the harness on him whilst he was in the crate, and it was a completely material harness. It wasn't any like bulky clips on it, so it wasn't uncomfortable for him to wear. It was purposely soft for this reason, but by doing that it meant that when we did take him out of the crate to go to the toilet, we had control of him at all times. We never had to get him out and then just have him stand there whilst we put a harness on. It was already on, so that removed that risk. It just meant that we could keep control of him at all times and he would never slip whilst we were holding him, and if he did, we had him and we could just hoist him up. And on the subject of slipping, tip number 11, get a lot of non-slip mats. Honestly, I bought so many. I've still got them actually. They're in the garage. I've still got loads of them. I don't know what to do with them. I can't throw them out because I've spent so much money on them. Depending on the sort of flooring that you've got in the room that they're staying, you might want to get these. If you've got a carpet, that's less likely to happen because they've got more friction. But any wooden flooring or tiled surfaces, it's definitely a good idea to look at getting some non-slip mats. So that way you can sort of make a non-slip walkway from the crate to the garden, and that's just going to remove the risk of them slipping on their way out. As well as non-slip mats, you're also going to want to make a safe area for them when they are allowed out of the crate after the 6-week mark. So with Bear, he was in the living room in the crate, but when he came out of it, he likes to sit by the window in the living room anyway. But having wooden floors, we literally covered the entire surface of the living room with bits of carpet, mats, non-slip mats. It was like a mismatch of colour. It was pretty awful, but it did the job. It stopped him from slipping, and it meant we could easily take him from the crate to sit in this little safe zone and he wouldn't have to worry about slipping when he stood up then. So between week 1 and week 6, they are still likely to dislocate. So if you are going to give them time out of the crate, you want to keep that to a minimum. Ideally, you do need to keep them in the crate for as much as possible, because it is really vital to their healing. But if you do take them out, you need to make sure it is for short periods only and they are on a short lead. You cannot let them have such a long lead that they're going to be able to bolt off if they want to, and you need to make sure the surface that they're on is non-slip. That is so important. Honestly, if you can't ensure that, don't bother letting them out, because it is not worth the risk. Tip number 14 is to get lots of interactive toys. So with Bear, we bought him a Kong that we filled with a Kong paste. We bought him a Kong wobbler, which you put treats in and it wobbles, and it's interactive. They get treats out that way. We also got him marrow bones. He was on a raw diet at the time. He had lots of other toys, balls, soft toys. He enjoyed taking the stuffing out of those. Kept him busy. We also bought him a snuffle mat, which is like a cushion with lots of loose bits of fabric on it, and you hide biscuits in between the material, and they snuffle through it and they get the treats out, and it just takes a little bit of time. It gets their mind going, keeps them busy. You can also get creative with little DIY things, with toilet rolls. You can get a towel and roll up some treats inside of it, so they spend a little bit of time, digging through it to get the treats out. There's lots of options out there. Tip number 15 is keeping them calm when they're in the crate. So as I said, I'm going to keep saying it, the first couple of weeks it's so easy for them to dislocate. You really do need to restrict them in the crate and keep them calm, because it is easy for them to freak out whilst they're in a small space. And obviously with large breed dogs, German shepherds, they're active breeds, they don't like to be sat still. But something that we found was really helpful and honestly a lifesaver was ACP tablets, and they're a form of sedative. And people are going to freak out when I say that, because they don't want to sedate their dog, obviously nobody does. But when the alternative is that they're going to dislocate it and they're going to have to go through the whole process again, it's just not worth the risk. And it was something that our vet gave us. We didn't ask for them. They knew that it was going to be difficult to keep a German Shepherd restricted for 6 weeks, and they were right. And these ACP tablets, it would just mellow them out a little bit, and that was honestly a game changer. It really did help. Without them, I don't think we would have coped keeping them in a crate for 6 weeks. It really does depend on the vet and the situation, I guess. But if you can get them, if you ask your vet for them and they say, yeah, that's fine, definitely get them, because they are a game changer. I've also heard great things about CBD oil, which isn't something that's really pushed that much in the UK, but I know is a big thing in the US. I know a lot of dogs who have had great success in using this. It's really helped with recovery periods and keeping them calm. That could be something that's worth looking into as well. Tip number 16 is, if you have any other dogs in the household, keeping them calm around your recovering dog. When you're trying to keep that dog in the crate calm, the last thing you want is other dogs winding him up on the outside. Obviously you still want them to be able to interact through the crate, but just keep that on a low level. Make sure that they don't try and wind each other up too much. It is just going to remind the dog that he's not allowed out to play. Tip 17 is physiotherapy. If you're looking at doing your own version at home, obviously this is going to be several weeks down the line when they've healed up, but things you can do are sit stands, which is where you encourage the dog to go from a sitting position to a standing position, and then repeat that. So that's essentially like doing a squat, which is going to help increase the hind muscles around the hip. Another thing you can look at is encouraging them to walk over small obstacles. Obviously not hurdles, you're not going to encourage them to jump, but just the motion of raising their legs a little bit higher than they would walking. That's going to help build up the muscle mass. That's really easy to do. You can do that with toilet rolls, you can do it with toys, anything you've got lying around, as long as it's not too high, and just encourage them to walk over it. Tip number 19 is orthopedic beds, and this is something you can get at any stage in the recovery process. So these are beds that are specially made for dogs after surgery or with joint issues. They're going to be made out of special foam that are going to be really cushioning on the joints. To be honest, this isn't really something I looked at during the recovery process, but I wish that I had post-recovery. We've actually bought Bear a big Barker bed from the US, and that is specifically designed for dogs with hip dysplasia. And I wish I'd found this sooner, because he really loves it, and I'm not just saying that, he does, he loves it. And this is a dog that I've bought countless beds for over the years, and he's always preferred the sofa, but he does spend a lot of time on this mattress. They are quite expensive, but they do come with a warranty. If you are prepared to spend a little bit extra, it is worth it in the long run. And also, like I said, this is specifically designed for hip dysplasia cases. But yeah, after the surgery, gone through the recovery, just treat them to a nice bed to make sure everything's maintained. You don't want them to be lying on hard surfaces really. Orthopedic beds are definitely worth looking at. Tip number 20 is just going to be persevere with it. I mean, it is going to be a really stressful process. It is going to feel long and never ending at times. But just persevere with it, you know, do your best. The main thing is not letting them slip, but as long as you're careful, I'm sure it'll be fine. It will be worth it in the end. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a like, and if there's any tips you think we missed out, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, we put out new videos every week. See you next time.